Hey, how you getting on? It's low contrast face John Brown here, and today I have the Orange Gain Baby 100 here, and I'm going to try and figure out how well it holds its own against the Orange Rockerverb 50 Mark III. And the way I've got it set up, it sounds like this. So to my ears, this sounds much heavier than it did to me at 42 Gear Street. And 42 Gear Street is where this story starts. I went to 42 Gear Street this year where I got to meet the semi-aquatic human Charlie Cooper from Orange Amps. We had a great conversation at the Whirlpool where he resided the first day. I told him what I do, he told me what he does, he showed me his methods, spreadsheets. Being the nerd I am, I really enjoyed that. Charlie had the idea I should compare the baby amps from Orange at the event, which I did and I enjoyed. But despite the name 42 Gear Street, it's not the ideal place to do deep dives on gear and do meticulous testing. The gear is really just the medium. That's much more about connections and the people, to be honest. And Henning probably told me so to my face pretty much, and I still didn't understand that. It only sunk in much later. However, Charlie had already said I should pick one of the baby amps I like most, take that home for a video. And that makes this a sponsored video. I'll be invoicing Orange for this. And I chose the Gain Baby because I liked it quite a bit, and because from the channel topography, it seemed the most similar to the Rockerverb 50 to me. Oops. And that seemed like a very interesting video to make to me because both these amps have a very clean channel and one dirty channel. There's a few minor differences, but the Gain Baby is solid state, and the Rockerverb is tube, obviously. The Gain Baby costs about a fourth of the price the Rockerverb does. So let's see if the Gain Baby can hold its own against the flagship amp here. So what I'm going to do is, because 42 Gear Street is not the ideal place to check out gear, there's too many unknown variables, unknown cab, unknown microphones. I'm not miking the cab myself most of the time. Don't know what preamps they're using. I don't know the guitars there. So it's really hard to get a sense of what the gear can do, and it's much different to me at home than it was at 42 Gear Street. So long story short, I want to do a quick recap on the Gain Baby. We're going to check out the channels, dial them a bit, and then compare it to the Rockerverb. At the end, I'm just going to unscrew the top here, and we're going to take a peek inside the amp. I'm using a PRS-CE and drop C sharp. Occasionally, I'll be boosting the amps with this Maxon OD808X overdrive. I've put both amps on my Orange PPC 412, which started life as a HP8, so it was loaded with 8 ohm K100s. I've replaced them with vintage 30s from the 80s, and I've got mic'd up an original vintage 30 from 1986, a year 1 V30 with a Shure SM57 with a dust cap and the cone. So pretty much it. Let's start with the dirty channel on the Gain Baby. Without a boost. Definitely has that orange thickness. The gain is pretty high right now. Let's dial that lower and see how crunchy we can get. There's a very light crunch. The tight switch is in. In fact, I think it's out. I'm wrong. It was in before. Makes quite a bit difference. Makes quite a big difference at low gain settings, at least. Let's. With some volume knob riding, we can coax a clean tone out of this channel pretty well, in fact. That's not only passable, that's pretty good, but that's not what this channel is about. Let's up the gain a bit. Quite a big jump there. Much more beefy with the tight switch at the top position. Let's add more gain. More gain! Still quite a lot of clarity though. Let's add the tight switch, or let's move the tight switch to the lower position for that. And it becomes much less noticeable when the gain is higher, at least in the room. I'm not sure it's going to be under the mic. I'll find out in editing. You will have found out now. But in the room, there's not much of a difference, to be honest. So, what's next? Let's add a boost to that. That's plenty of gain. To be honest, I feel more comfortable with a little less. There's more clarity. That's where the sweet spot is for me. I'm going to take the boost out, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to loop a riff through a looper pedal, and then we're going to dial the EQ knobs to see how effective they are, and I'll show the frequency response knobs on screen. One difference between this and the Orange Rockerverb is the dirty channel has a presence knob, which the Rockerverb doesn't. And I know that is something that some people complain about on the Rockerverb amps, no presence. That seems to be a deal breaker for a lot of people. So I'm interested to see how effective that's going to be. Let me hook up the looper pedal. Right, the boost is off for this. I'm going to start with bass, move over to middle, then to treble, and we're going to finish off with presence. Let's go. Right, the bass and middle seem effective enough. They don't alter the tone super drastically. The most effective dials, at least in the room, to my extra average ears, were the treble and the presence knob. They seem to shape the tone most. But even with the treble max or the presence max, the tone got bright, but not harsh. So pretty well laid out EQ, if you ask me. So before we move on to the shootout, I wanted to check out the clean channel of this amp as well. So I don't want to dwell on the clean channel for too long because it's not really my comfort zone. It's not my wheelhouse. I'm not a great clean player. I'm not a great player to begin with, but cleans I pretty much just use them for effect. But I found this clean channel particularly cool because of the built-in compressor, the comp knob here. When demoing clean channels, usually I have to be a bit careful with the picking, because if I dig in too hard, I'll clip the mic inputs, because clean channels tend to be very dynamic. There's less compression. With high gain channels, each gain stage adds a bit of compression, so it doesn't really have that much of a drastic effect if you play softly or dig in hard. Clean channels, on the other hand, you need to know what you're doing, which doesn't really fit the description for me. So I've got the comp dialed pretty high. There's a reflection on the knob I can't see, so it's at about 2 o'clock. And it sounds like this. Pretty clean channel. There's no dirt. And where I used to be very careful to have more or less consistent picking strength, I can just... I can really smack the crap out of the strings without risking clipping the mic input. Let's dial the comp all the way down. You could see the LED flash up here every time the compressor does its thing. And with the compression all the way down, you notice there's a significant volume drop. Compression in this amp, or in general, really kind of levels the volume. It tends to bring the volume up. So we'll have to add some more volume to get to a similar level. And I don't know how well that's going to come across through YouTube, but so I'm not clipping the mic inputs this time. I'm kind of monitoring it here, but there's much more dynamics. There's much more quiet. And obviously that's a stylistic choice everybody has to make for themselves. I like the compression in. Now I have to push that up to volume the lower the volume. And I love that feature. My troglodyte brain wants every clean channel to have a built-in compressor. Alright, enough of that. Let's go back to the dirty channel and see how it compares to the Rockerverb. So I'll be playing some riffs and switching back and forth between the two amps, using my KHG switcher behind me here. I'll put on screen what you're hearing. I'm using a floorboard in front of me to switch the amps. So gain and tone are pretty close already. The Rockerverb seems a little more, seems a little bit louder. I need to adjust that a bit. I'm kind of freaked how close they are. I've been doing some real fine tweaking here on the Gain Baby 100 to get the high end to respond similarly, and I think, at least in the room, they get really, really close. The low end seems to be a little different on the Rockerverb. That might be the difference between 50 watts and 100 watts. I do think, though, it's probably the gain stage technology. This will be high voltage JFETs. This is tubes, obviously. But still, I'm pretty surprised how close the Gain Baby gets, at least in the room. Yeah, let's play a riff. I'm not sure if it's tiny volume differences, but the Rockerverb seems a little denser, for lack of a better word. There's just something, it just responds slightly differently, but the tones are very close. It's at a boost. See, now I'm confused because I upped the volume on the Gain Baby a bit, and now it seems very close in the way it delivers. Yeah, human perception or my hearing, very, very flawed. Let me just remove the boost one more time just to see how they compare that way. Yeah, there are differences. The delivery is different. I can't really put to words. I can't describe what the difference is, but they feel and sound different. Not better or worse, just slightly different. And I'm very positively surprised by the Gain Baby. Let's see what they do at lower gain settings. One thing I like about the Gain Baby is it doesn't have these notched pots. I know some people love that about the Orange Rockerverb Mark III. That's the only thing I dislike, the notches in the pot. So the pot kind of jumps to fixed positions, kind of clicks. You can balance it between that. It's not the pot, I'm sure. I think there's probably a ring in between the pot and the probably a ring on the pot that does that. But I find it very, my OCD doesn't work with that. But I find it irritating, sorry. I think the main difference is actually in the way the amps respond to the notes. I think the Orange Rockerverb 50 has a little more sag. There's a bit of give, and then the note blooms a bit more. Excuse me. While the Gain Baby has less of that. It's more direct. Let's max the gain on both. We'll see how that sounds. Yeah, I think that's it. That's the way the note blooms on the Rockerverb. That's the biggest difference between them. Well, for good measure, let's compare the clean channels. The Rockerverb has a really nice clean channel to my ears, and it's one of my favorite clean channels of the amps I own. But the Gain Baby holds its own. It's a fantastic sounding clean channel as well. And I think that really concludes the comparison. For good measure, I want to mention that there are some slight feature differences between them. Obviously, the dirty channel on the Gain Baby has the tight switch and the presence knob. Those are things that the Rockerverb lacks. However, the Rockerverb has a fantastic spring reverb on board. That's why it's the Rockerverb, duh. And this attenuator, an onboard attenuator function, which is brilliant. Before I was able to be loud in the house, I would use preamp pedals into the effects loop of the Rockerverb and use the attenuator to adjust the volume to not wake people in the house. So that's probably my favorite feature on the Orange Rockerverb Mark III. And before I leave you with my final thoughts, let's just take the top off the Gain Baby 100 and take a look inside. Well, I don't know about you, but I love popping things open and looking at the insides of this. And the Gain Baby looks really interesting on the inside. Now, I'm not sure how well you're going to be able to see this, but this is the power transformer, a huge toroidal transformer, at least considering the size of the entire unit. We have this huge heatsink here to dissipate the heat, and some smaller heat sinks for the ICs on the board here. Electrolytic capacitors to filter the mains power. We have diodes here, which I presume are for rectification. You can see the board attached to the pots there. I'm not sure how good the lighting is going to be. There's loads of small SMD components on that. So if you're a repairman, you're going to need a steady hand to change those out. But considering that, they're all labeled and they're all very well accessible. So as far as my amateur eye can tell, this is pretty well laid out. pretty cool. So what do I think of the Orange Game Baby 100? Well, first of all, I think I somehow was accidentally smart with this sponsored video by choosing an Orange amp as the reference amp. So no matter what I say, Orange is going to come out on top. But still, the Orange Game Baby 100 surprised me in how well it held its own against the Orange Rockerverb 50. To be honest with you, I was a little scared I'd set myself up for a failure with this test. I was afraid the Rockerverb 50 would just crush the Game Baby 100. But fair play to Orange, they were confident in their design, and I can see why now. Now, let's put myself in a ridiculous hypothetical scenario. Somebody's pointing a gun to my head and tells me I can only keep one of these two. I'm keeping the Rockerverb 50, obviously. The differences are minor, but the feel of the Rockerverb 50 is a little more natural to me. It's a little more fun to play. It's just a fantastic amp. However, the Game Baby 100 costs a fourth. Is the Rockerverb 50 4 times as good? No, not even close. Not even twice as good. Maybe it's just 5 to 10% better, to my ears at least. So in a different scenario, I have neither of these amps and I want to put together a studio with some reference amp for reference tones. Knowing what I know now and having the experience I just made, I'd probably gravitate towards the Game Baby 100 because it's so much more affordable and it delivers very similar tones, which I doubt anybody would be able to tell the difference in a dense mix. Another scenario, if I'm a giggy musician, I'm picking the Game Baby 100 because, first of all, it's tiny and it's light as a feather. It's loud and it delivers the tones. And it comes with this cool carry bag as well. So you can just pop it in there, walk up to the gig and play your show. So both have their deserved place in the Orange amp lineup, if you ask me. I'm going to post affiliate links to both these amps in the description down below because I think I'm finished. I hope you enjoyed this little video and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye bye.